In 2017, hikers in Utah filmed a metallic disc hovering silently over a mountain crater. No wings, no exhaust, no propulsion. It's one of the clearest UFOs ever caught on camera. But what stopped researchers wasn't the footage. It was the match. Same shape, same silence, same impossible stillness. All described 60 years earlier by a police sergeant in New Mexico who saw an egg-shaped craft on 4 legs, 2 beings in white coveralls, and a takeoff so violent it turned sand into glass.
I came up here this road till I could find a flat spot where I could park my car. I got out the car and glanced down to the arroyo there, and I saw this white-looking object. It was sort of a big egg shape, bigger than a car. Those are the exact bushes that were there, and the craft was sitting right in between them too. So I started down to see what it was, and then I heard this big boom in the bottom, and fire came off the bottom. So I started running behind my police car to take cover. I could feel the heat off that because it was windy like now, and then it gradually pulled up about 20, 30 feet and stayed there for a while, and then just took off.
The Air Force investigated. The FBI documented it. Then someone removed the evidence before sunrise and told the sergeant to change his story. The proof is out there. It's just been buried.
According to the Air Force and government, they say they don't know what it was, and they never told me the not to say or say about it, talk about it, but they say that they don't know what it was.
The Uinta Mountains footage. In June 2017, hikers trekking through Utah's remote Uinta Mountains captured footage that is now considered one of the clearest UFO recordings in recent years. What their camera picked up was a massive disc-shaped object, estimated to be several hundred feet in diameter, hovering, motionless above a mountain crater. The craft had a metallic surface that reflected sunlight in a way that didn't match any known material or aircraft coating. There were no wings, no exhaust, no rotor blades, no visible propulsion system of any kind. Despite gusty, high-altitude wind, the object held a perfectly fixed position, as though gravity and weather had no effect on it. The hikers who filmed it said it was unlike anything they'd ever seen. It wasn't moving like a plane or helicopter, it just hovered. Observers noted an eerie silence surrounding the craft, and some reports describe subtle, pulsing lights along its rim. The footage spread quickly through UFO research communities and is still being analyzed. Experts have noted that the object's stability, size, and shape are consistent with patterns seen across decades of UFO reports. The U.S. military has made no comment on the sighting, but what caught researchers' attention wasn't just the footage, it was the specifics. A metallic, disc-shaped. No wings or propulsion. Complete silence. An object that held motionless in conditions that should have moved it. Detail for detail, the Uinta footage echoed a description given by a New Mexico police sergeant more than 50 years earlier. A description backed by physical evidence, FBI documentation, and a government investigation that was never resolved. The encounter. April 24, 1964, 5:45 p.m. Police Sergeant Lonnie Zamora is driving through the desert south of Socorro, New Mexico, chasing a speeding vehicle. It's routine work. He radios dispatch to log the pursuit. The sun is low. The desert is quiet. Nothing about this evening suggests it will be anything other than ordinary. Then he hears a loud roar. Not a bang, not a blast, a roar. And he sees a bright flame descending from the sky, roughly half a mile away. Zamora breaks off the chase immediately. He thinks something has exploded. Maybe a dynamite shack. Maybe an aircraft has gone down. He turns his cruiser down a gravel road toward the source, driving fast, expecting to find wreckage or a fire. As he crests a hill and rounds a bend, he spots a large metallic object resting on the ground, about 150 to 200 yards away. At first, he thinks it's an overturned car, but the shape is wrong. The surface is wrong. It's off-white, aluminum-colored, egg-shaped, and sitting on 4 distinct legs. It's not a car. It's not any vehicle he recognizes. Zamora is a man well-versed in identifying airborne vehicles in his area. He knows what belongs in this sky. This doesn't. Then he sees the figures. 2 small beings near the base of the craft, wearing what look like white coveralls. They appear to be either small adults or large children based on their stature. One of them turns and looks directly at Zamora, seemingly startled by his presence. For a brief moment, the police sergeant and whatever these beings are make eye contact across the desert. Zamora turns away, for a moment, to radio for backup. When he looks back, he hears 2 or 3 loud thumping sounds like the slamming of a heavy car door. The figures are gone, completely vanished. No trace of where they went. No movement. No sound of footsteps. Just empty desert where 2 beings had been standing seconds earlier. He moves closer on foot. At about 20 meters from the craft, he notices a red symbol on its side, an arc with an arrow-like shape inside it. It doesn't match any airline insignia, any military marking, any NASA logo, or any known alphabet. Zamora has spent years working near military airfields and missile ranges. He knows what military markings look like. This isn't one of them. Then, the craft begins to lift off. A blue-orange flame erupts from beneath it. The roar returns, intense and disorienting, shifting from high frequency to low frequency. Zamora panics. He turns and runs, dropping his glasses in the process. The craft rises into the air, hovers for a few seconds, as though surveying the landscape, and then shoots across the sky at tremendous speed. The roar stops abruptly. And then there is complete silence. No trail, no smoke, nothing. What they found. Minutes later, Sergeant Sam Chavez arrives. He'd heard Zamora's second radio dispatch and came to investigate. What he finds is a colleague in a state of profound shock. Zamora is white-faced, sweating cold, and visibly shaken. Whatever he saw, it clearly had a deeply disturbing effect on him. The 2 officers move toward the site. What they find corroborates everything Zamora described. 4 distinct depressions in the hard-packed desert soil, spaced in a quadrilateral pattern consistent with landing gear. The impressions are deeper and sharper than any ordinary vehicle track would leave. Around them, patches of sandy soil have been compacted to a glass-like texture, the kind of transformation that only happens when sand is exposed to extreme heat. The brush and greasewood near the site are singed and smoldering. Another officer, James Lucky, arrives and later describes the scene. The bushes looked like somebody had hit them from the top with a giant flamethrower. And Zamora, he said, was white as a corpse. Not his normal complexion. He was sweating, but it was cold sweat. State police, journalists, and the U.S. Air Force all converge on the site within hours. The Air Force confirms that none of their aircraft were involved. A check of all helicopter activity within a 300-mile radius, including White Sands, Kirtland Air Force Base, and Biggs in El Paso, came back negative. All military helicopters were accounted for. None had landing gear matching the marks on the ground. Radiation tests showed nothing. Soil samples submitted for spectrographic analysis revealed no foreign materials and no chemical residues consistent with any known propellant. Whatever had been there, It didn't run on anything in the military's database. All investigators agreed. The marks were fresh, they were made by something of impressive size and weight, and there was nothing at the site that could be explained by ordinary means. Other witnesses. Zamora wasn't the only one who experienced something that evening. Within hours, multiple members of the public called local police to report a glowing bright object in the sky and loud roaring sounds. 3 separate callers described the same thing. Another witness had contacted the Albuquerque TV station at 5:30 p.m., 15 minutes before Zamora's encounter, claiming they'd seen a UFO heading south toward Socorro. Opal Grinder, a local gas station operator, provided some of the most compelling corroboration. He told investigators that 2 travelers had entered his station just after the loud boom Zamora reported. They mentioned that aircraft in the area seemed to fly unusually low. When Grinder suggested they'd probably just seen a helicopter, one of the men replied, "It was a funny-looking helicopter. If that's what it was." The timing matched Zamora's encounter exactly. Grinder didn't think much of it at the time, but when he heard about Zamora's report the next morning, he called the radio station and told them Zamora was not telling a lie, because that tourist saw something too. And he saw the police going toward the object that was on the ground. 2 motorists from Iowa, Larry Kratzer and Paul Keyes, were passing through the area at the time. Interviewed years later by UFO researcher Ralph DeGraw, Kratzer described seeing an egg-shaped object ascending vertically from a cloud of smoke before leveling off and moving away. He also reported seeing a strange symbol on the side of the craft, the same detail Zamora had described independently. Then, in the days following the incident, another sighting was reported nearby. A man visiting his father claimed a craft shaped like a butane tank was disturbing the horses in the middle of the night. He described the same flame Zamora had seen. Investigators found ground indentations and a smoldering patch of earth measuring 30 to 40 feet across. Multiple witnesses, multiple locations, multiple days, all describing the same thing. The cover-up. The military moved fast. Less than 24 hours after the incident, Army Captain Richard T. Holder and FBI agent Arthur Burns were interviewing Zamora at length. During the interview, according to later released documents, officials advised him to omit certain details from his account, especially regarding the mysterious markings on the craft. That same night, Holder and Burns took flashlights to the site to investigate in the dark. By the next morning, the glass-like compacted soil, the most striking physical evidence at the scene, had been removed. No explanation was ever given for why it was taken or where it went. Then there were the photographs. Retired police officer Ted Jordan later revealed that Air Force investigators had asked him for a reel of film he'd been using to photograph the site. The reel included images of the indentations, the scorched bushes, and what Jordan described as shapes resembling footprints near the landing area. When Jordan asked for his film back, the Air Force told him the photographs had been ruined by radiation and failed to come out. He never saw them again. The footprints are a significant detail. Zamora had reported seeing 2 beings near the craft. It's reasonable to assume they would have left prints in the desert soil. Early newspaper reports from the time mention odd puck-shaped marks near the site, but in the official FBI files and the public-facing Air Force reports, there is no confirmed mention of footprints. Whatever Jordan photographed, it was removed from the record. The Air Force produced 2 separate reports on the incident. The first, released to the public, shrugged the whole thing off. Nothing major. Nothing of concern. The second, written by Hector Quintanilla, Jr., the former head of Project Blue Book, struck a very different tone. It described the Air Force as puzzled by the case and acknowledged that Zamora's account could not be explained. Quintanilla himself later wrote, "Lonnie Zamora experienced an event which left quite an impression on him. He was a serious officer, a pillar of his church, and a man well versed in recognizing airborne vehicles in his area. He was puzzled by what he saw, and frankly, so am I." And then there was the matter of the symbol. In one recorded interview, when Zamora was asked about the red markings on the craft, he said plainly, "They don't want me to say anything about the markings." It's alleged that Captain Holder instructed Zamora to give reporters a fake version of the insignia. In initial descriptions, Zamora described a triangle with 3 lines through it, not the arc and arrow symbol that later became commonly known. Somewhere between the encounter and the official record, the story was changed. FBI files released. Years later described Zamora as sober, dependable, mature, and not known to engage in flights of fantasy. This was not a man who made things up. Soil samples from the site showed no propellant residue or radioactivity, meaning whatever had been there didn't run on anything in the military's database. And despite all of this, despite the physical evidence, the multiple witnesses, the corroborating testimony, and the FBI's own assessment of Zamora's credibility, the official public stance remained. Nothing to see here. The gap between what the government said publicly and what it documented privately is the most troubling part of the entire case. One set of reports was designed to reassure the public. The other revealed an investigation that was, in Quintanilla's own words, the most thorough that was humanly possible, and still came up empty. What could it have been? Plenty of people have tried to explain what Zamora saw. None of the explanations hold up. The easy dismissals came first. Ball lightning, a mirage caused by the star Canopus, a hot air balloon. None of these account for the roaring sound, the blue-orange flame, 4 precise landing impressions in hard-packed soil, or sand compacted into glass. One skeptic even claimed Zamora invented the whole thing to boost tourism in Socorro. The FBI's own assessment of him as sober, dependable, and not known for flights of fantasy makes that theory difficult to take seriously. A more credible theory pointed to NASA. In 1964, NASA was testing its Surveyor lunar probe at the nearby White Sands Missile Range, carried by helicopter. The probe used rockets, which could explain the flames, and technicians would have worn white coveralls. But Socorro is nearly 100 miles from White Sands. NASA doesn't fly experimental craft into towns, and the Surveyor had 3 legs, bore a NASA logo, and was made of aluminum trusses. It wasn't egg-shaped or even solid. The most plausible theory involves students from the nearby New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology. Harvard astronomer Donald Menzel and the university's own president, Sterling Colgate, both believed it was a student prank. The energetics lab on campus had pyrotechnic equipment. Zamora had worked on campus for years and reportedly wasn't popular with students. Colgate called the craft a candle in a balloon. But no student has ever come forward to claim responsibility. Not in the 1960s. Not in the decades since. Not even anonymously. A prank of this scale, if it happened, would be one of the most elaborate and perfectly executed hoaxes in American history. And a candle in a balloon doesn't leave 4 precise landing impressions in hard-packed soil, turn sand into glass, or produce a roar heard by witnesses across multiple locations. Project Blue Book. By the end of the 1960s, the U.S. Air Force decided that UFOs no longer posed a threat to national security. Over its lifetime, the program investigated 12,618 UFO sightings. The vast majority were explained or dismissed. 701 of them were not. The Zamora case was one of those 701. It remains classified as unidentified to this day. Internal Blue Book documents, released through Freedom of Information Act requests, reveal the depth of the investigation. Soil samples were sent for spectrographic analysis. Helicopter activity was checked within a 300-mile radius. Radar surveillance records from White Sands and Alamogordo were reviewed. The insignia was sent to military identification experts, who confirmed it matched no known registration system from any country. No matches were found for any part of the case. No explanation was reached. There's one more detail. Blue Book files reference a documentary called Phenomena 7.7, an 80-minute film by Empire Film Studios in Hollywood, with a main sequence covering the Zamora case. That documentary has never resurfaced. No copies are known to exist. Whether it was suppressed or simply lost, nobody knows. The divergence between the public-facing reports and the internal documents has fueled suspicion for decades. One set of files minimized the incident. The other acknowledged its significance. The public was told not to worry. The investigators privately admitted they had no answers. The man who saw it, for Lonnie Zamora, the aftermath was harder than the encounter itself. In the years that followed, he was subjected to intense public attention, constant skepticism, and repeated questioning from authorities and media. UFO tourists would travel to Socorro to track him down. They'd knock on his door at all hours, stop him in the street, call him in the middle of the night. Strangers, journalists, conspiracy theorists, pranksters, all wanting the same thing: for him to tell the story one more time. He grew tired of it. He stopped trying to make a case for what he'd seen. He grew cynical about the whole subject. Socorro. Locals warned reporters not to bother trying to talk to him, that he wouldn't engage, and for the most part, they were right. The man who had reported one of the most significant UFO sightings in history wanted nothing more than to be left alone. But Zamora never changed his account. Not once. Not under pressure from investigators. Not under pressure from skeptics. Not under pressure from decades of public scrutiny. Colleagues and investigators consistently described him as reliable, grounded, and honest. He had no history of fabrication, no interest in attention. He was a serious officer, a pillar of his church, and a man who simply reported what he saw and then spent the rest of his life paying the price for it. In one of his last interviews before his death in 2009, Zamora said something that stayed with the people who heard it. He said, "The experience was more frightening than anything that could happen." If you're a policeman and you get in a gun battle, you're scared. But once it's over, it's over. But this, you can't forget. He never forgot. And neither has anyone who's looked closely at what happened that evening in the New Mexico desert. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.